today we're going to be separating this into two videos. We're going to be doing a part 1 video, which will be discussing week 8, our week 8 simple corrections, and week 9 review, which I'd like you to be very clear about because that's where we're moving on to next. And part 2 is going to be talking about our different one simple way to increase your English production, and we're going to be talking about our introduction paragraphs. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to move us over to discuss part 1. So we're moving to part 1. Part 1, again, we're going to be talking about week 8 simple corrections and week 9 our review. So what I'd like to do is to start with slide 3. So slide 3, we're moving specifically into week 8 and simple corrections that I noticed were some simple corrections that are very necessary for a lot of students. And the first point is that I'm still having issues with many students who don't seem to clearly understand the instructions. And I can understand that because at times it can be confusing, but remember that one of the skills you should be developing as university students is to ask questions. And I know sometimes it's scary to ask a person in authority, like one of the teachers. Some people are very brave and they're able to ask people questions. But other people feel a little bit shy, which I understand, me too. But it's really important for you to ask those questions. So I suggest 3 different ways that you can handle this. First of all, if you feel a little bit shy and you're not sure about something, you can ask a classmate. For example, I'm not sure if you have been able to meet each other as yet or not, but you should be talking to one of your classmates. You should have done it last week for your interviews, and you'll be doing it again with the same person this week for your English interviews. So in that case, you can ask that person if they know about what you're confused about, or if you aren't sure, or even if you want maybe a second opinion to check and make sure that what that student understood is actually correct. Why don't you give your class captain a shout? Or, send them a message and ask, what's this, or what does this mean, or how do you do this? And again, if you're still unsure, or if you want a third opinion or second opinion, then contact me as well. I'm very, very happy to help, and I can give direct feedback as well. It's just much more complex for me to be giving individual feedback. So what I've done instead is to give a more general feedback to everybody, because I find that it's much more comfortable for students overall, and also that it's a little bit easier to deal with. People don't feel like it's the spotlight is on them only. So the most major factor is to, when it comes to writing a paragraph, is to make sure that you are writing about the topic as you were given it. So that the topic in this case was your book paragraph. So the book paragraph topic actually was about, what I wanted to hear about was why you chose that particular book. So what happened was that many students gave me a book summary. Now I guess part of the reason perhaps is that this is how you have studied writing in English and studied about books in any language, is to basically for the teachers to see if you A, read the book, and B, if you understood what you were reading about. So they ask you to give a book report, which is essentially a summary of the book that you have read. But in our case, our focus is a little bit different because we're looking for the production, okay, for the production of your language, your English language skills. So what I was looking for actually is for you to think about why you chose the book, organize your ideas, and then to describe to me the major reasons why you chose that book. And there are a wide variety of reasons. It could be something as simple as the book was right beside you. But whatever the case is, the topic should have been about why you chose the book, not about the summary of the book. Unless the summary, like if the book itself was the characters in the book perhaps were an important reason for why you chose that book, then yes, that could definitely be one of your details. But this is why part of your skill is in organizing what it is you want to focus on when you talk or when you write. So, moving on, I'm going to move on now to week, sorry, where am I? Slide 4. So in slide 4, we're talking also about our simple corrections. And for slide 4, what I wanted to take a look at was some simple issues that people had. So one of the, I think that I am repeating myself. I don't think it, I know it. I am repeating myself. So actually one of the skills that you should be developing for yourself is how to fix your writing so that you do not have these mistakes that are continuing to be made. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix our own mistakes. And also this is to provide a means for you to understand, this is right, that is wrong, so that when you become teachers in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed, that you will be able to teach these skills to your future students as well. So, part of our issue together has been for us to take a look at different aspects of writing and for you to learn about different writing skills. So one of the first issues that I had with a number of these book paragraphs was something we've been speaking about for many, many weeks. So I'm getting a little bit repetitive, and I'm sorry, but unfortunately these are still big problems. So until these problems are fixed, I have to keep focusing on them because they are still a big issue. So the first and foremost of these is when you write a title, there are some basic points. The most important point is to capitalize your title. So in this case, we have a funny book, Gulliver's Travels, and we had almost all the capitals were there, but book needs to be capitalized as well. So don't forget that any major word, always the first one, always the last one, and any major word in the middle must be capitalized. Next is that, do you remember when we talked before about how in English we love to count nouns? Countable nouns make up about 80% of the nouns in the English language, which means this is a very, very good, a crucial skill for you to develop is to count nouns. So one of these simple points is in an example, for example, in your titles, when you talk about book, we have to count it, and we have to say a book or books. So a funny book has to have the we need the article. So we need a funny book, Gulliver's Travels, capitalize it, perfect, lovely, lovely. Next, now these are some, again, problem areas, but I think they're quite easy for you to fix. The biggest problem seems to be time. I feel like many of you are just trying to get the work done, which I understand. I totally understand, especially for young students. Figuring out how to use your time wisely is always an issue. It's an issue for all students, including graduate students. But anyways, so please, please, please focus on these issues, because part of this development of your skills is finding how mistakes are made for yourself so that later you can help your friends, help your family, and help your students. Because essentially that's what you're training to do right now, right, is to find ways to help your future students. So of course one of these points is for you to find mistakes. So in English writing, these were some of the most common mistakes, and still, so we're week 9 now, so the majority of these should not still be being made. So the first one is that many students did not give a title for their book paragraph. But remember that any piece of writing you do in English, it should have a title. You also know the rules about a title. So just by providing a title, which gives the general topic of what you're going to be discussing, it shows that you have good knowledge, good education, and good vocabulary skill. It also shows that you have good grammar knowledge and good writing skills because you know about things like capitalizing titles and about countable nouns. So another major point was that we had no indents. Now, I'm not sure if everybody remembers, but an indent essentially is the space right at the beginning of a paragraph to show that you are going to begin talking about a new topic. So essentially the indents are to show that you're starting a new paragraph. You need indents, okay? It's an important skill, again, for you to develop. And although I understand that many of you perhaps feel like it's not important, actually you communicate so much information through your writing and also when you're speaking. It's really important for you to learn about these tools and to develop them for yourself. The next one. So the next issue that we had was that there was an issue with balance. So I thought the writing overall was really good. I'm really enjoying reading your assignments, even the ones that seem to be kind of whipped through because I'm learning about you, and since we can't meet face to face right now, unfortunately, this is the best way for me to learn about you is through your writing. So the balance key basically is up to you. So if, for example, I noticed that some students were starting with a 3-sentence introduction. So a 3-sentence introduction is fantastic. It's really lovely, and I like it when students write. But if you write a 3-sentence introduction, then how many sentences should your detail 1 be? Correct. 3 sentences. And what about detail 2? 3 sentences. Detail 3? The same, 3 sentences. And your conclusion also? Amazing. 3 sentences. So it's up to you. If you do want to write 3 sentences or 4 sentences for your introduction, it's possible. I'm not going to say it's not possible. But it means you need to keep that balance throughout your paragraph. Or throughout your essay. So what we're looking for is good skill and a good system. So I suggest the simplest system is 2 sentences. So work your best, try your best to keep that balance of 2 sentences for each of these major points in your paragraphs. The next point that I had was for sorry, I just skipped it. So I'm on slide 4, just to make sure everybody's with me. The next point that I had was about your transition words. Now, again, this is a topic that I've spoken to you about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewind a little bit and see, can you remember what trans means? T-R-A-N-S. So some really simple words I can think of are transport, transportation. There are a wide variety of words that use this as part of the word, but what does it mean? What does that show you? So I'm hoping what you do is you think about it. T-R-A-N-S, trans. What does trans mean? I'm hoping that you responded with it means to move or to change, right? So to transport something means to take it from one place and move it to another. So essentially our transition words are when we're showing we're changing. We're moving from one point to another point. So our transition words, we have a wide variety of transition words, and I gave you a number of them. So if you're not sure, please review. If you don't remember, that's no problem. You can also look on the internet and find other transition words if you wish. But the major point that we had in your book paragraphs was that they were absolutely missing. The majority of students did not use transition words at all. So if you did, excellent, good job, good job. If you didn't, please use them. Okay, these are a very effective, very simple tool to show when you're presenting in English, in Korean, in any language, but also when you're writing to show where you are. So if you're giving the presentation, it helps you in two ways. Number one, it helps you to memorize what you're going to talk about so that you have a very clear step-by-step process. Secondly is when you're writing, or when you're giving the presentation, it gives a very clear message to your audience to say where you are in your presentation. This also holds true for your writing. So when you're writing, this helps you to figure out, okay, all right, I've written detail 1, I've used a transition word, that transition word means I've finished detail 1, now I'm moving on to detail 2. You don't need to go back and reread everything to try and figure out where you are in your paragraph or in your essay. So please use transition words. Now, we also need to talk about which transition words to use. Because remember that when you communicate, when you write or when you speak, when you produce language, you have many, many choices of what to use. So for example, with your transition words, you can choose first, second, third. Now, if you choose first, second, third, these are transition words. They are good words. They are good transition words. But the issue is that they are elementary school level. They're very easy, very simple, and these are what your elementary school students should be using. But, or middle school perhaps also, I would accept it for middle school. But high school and university, definitely university, it's too simple, too easy. Sorry, but it is. And you want to communicate that you're university students, right? You don't want people to think, is she high school or is she university? We want to show you're university. We want to use academic language. So one of these ways is to choose transition words that are higher level, which I've given you a number of. And again, if you are unhappy, if the words that I gave you to choose from are not, you want other words, feel free. You are welcome to use other words. But the important point is using elementary school level first, second, third transition words. It's too simple. So sorry, much too simple. Now, if you want to, I would accept you using one. Okay, one of those transition words I would accept. Or using them and mixing them. So you could start with your detail 1 and say, first of all, comma, and then give you detail 1. That I would accept. And then you would say, next, finally, sure, that I would accept. Because it's not simplistic 1, 2, 3. So hopefully that's relatively comfortable and you can see clearly why these words are important. Especially for yourself, for your own writing, timed writing, if you have a limited amount of time to write something in, these are really good for you, really useful. Okay, moving on. The next thing I wanted to talk about was your citations. Now, if you do remember what citations are, citations basically just tell us about, the book that you read or the book that you looked at, the book you chose. So the citation information lets us know what the book is called, who wrote the book, and where the book was published, when it was published, and when it was published, who published it as well. So, the biggest problem that I had with your assignments is no citations. So I'm guessing because we're in week 9 and I had a number of missing information, or a lot of missing information, I should say, a number of missing information points, that you are very busy and perhaps you're feeling a little bit stressed about homework. So on that note, I decided this week to shorten your homework assignment. So I'm hoping that that helps to ease your stress levels a little bit. But what I wanted to talk about is that you do need your citations, because citations are something that you should be learning in elementary school. So I encourage you to teach your future students these ideas. And also that at university level, you should definitely know what these are and how to make them. Because you need to know a lot of information to be able to make a correct citation. So you need to know, if you look at somebody's name, that the given name comes first in English, the family name comes second in English. But when we give our citation, we actually follow Korean style. So we give the family name first, comma, and then the given name comes second. But this is just for the document, just for citations, for official citation form. So if you do not know how to make a citation, if you can't remember, contact me. I'm here to help. I would love to help you. I love teaching, and I love being a part of, us studying effectively and increasing our ability. I mean, this is our whole job, right? Make your life better, make our lives better. So please remember to follow the instructions, because if you do, in our homework assignments, basically I'm checking to see if you're getting the ideas right and if you're getting the assignments done. Overall, everyone's been doing a great job. I'm really happy. But we do need to focus on these mistakes, and we need to correct the mistakes for ourselves. And so in the future then, we know what is right, we know what is wrong, and we can help our students to learn those things. So moving on, I'm going to move on now to slide number 5. So slide number 5 were some examples that I took from your work, which showed citations which were unusual, we'll say. So the first biggest problem was no citation at all. These were some citations that I was given, but there were still there were still problems with these citations, because they're not really, well, 3 of them are not citations at all. So anyways, what I'd like you to do is take a short time to look at number 1. Can you see why number 1 is not a citation? And I'm hoping that you saw that, we just have Naver. Naver is a browser that we use on the internet. It's not a book, and it also doesn't give information about what the book was that you read or anything like that. Also, Naver is the name of a company, so it should have a capital letter for the N. Anyways, remember that your citation should be about the book. Now, what I did think about, though, is that perhaps you didn't have books at home, or a book at home in English, so maybe you went online to find a book that you liked, which is great. That's no problem at all. But the browser is not the information we want. What we want to find is we want to find the information that you need for your citation. So we need the book title, we need the author name, we need the publisher name, okay, so who it was who published the book, and we also need to find out when it was published and where it was published. So this information you can find online. You might have to look around a little bit, but it's usually quite easy to find. So take those extra few seconds to find this information. If you wrote Naver as part of a citation, I mean, you would lose points right away. Number 2. Now, number 2 is a much better example, but we still have some issues. So I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds. Let's see if you can figure out maybe 3 different mistakes that were made in this citation. So have a look and see if you can find them. Okay, so I'm hoping that you noticed the first point. So one of the first things that we studied in our class was about the differences and similarities between Korean style names and English style names. Now, if you take a look, so this was written by an Englishman. So his name is Alan Cruz, and if you remember that in English, usually the way we write names is given name first, family name second. So in this case, you have written it exactly correctly if it was written on the cover of a book. But remember, citations are a little bit different. Actually, citations follow Korean style names. So we should have the family name first, and then a comma, and the given name second. Okay, so it should be Arias, comma, Philip. Then we have a period, which is great because it shows that we're finished with that section. Then the next section is The Birth of a Child, Seoul Special City, 2003, September 16, Moonjiyoung. This becomes 1 point, okay, one part of the citation. So we only have 2 parts to this citation, which actually we want to separate it a bit more. So we need to put in some commas or periods to separate these different pieces of information. So the first point is the birth of a child is a title. So how do we show titles? I'm hoping right away you said capital letters. So for our capital letters, we need a capital T for the, capital B for birth, capital C for child. So the birth of a child, and then we need a comma or a period afterwards to show that that section is also finished. And then we move on to Seoul Special City. Now, Seoul Special City, I'm not 100% clear about your meaning. So if Seoul Special City is the name that you want to give for perhaps a special part of Seoul City, then you would need 3 capital letters. Capital S Seoul, capital S Special, capital C City. If you're referring to Seoul, like Gwangyok-si, like, then you could say maybe Seoul Metropolitan City. But traditionally in English, we don't actually separate a metropolitan city with words. We just say Seoul. So I would probably just put Seoul. And then you have the rest. I think if the publisher's name is Moonjiyoung, I'm assuming that's what the publisher's name is, then that would be acceptable if they write their name in that pattern. Moving on. Number 3. Can you see why number 3 is not a citation? It tells us nothing about the book. So I wasn't 100% sure what this referred to, but my guess was, you know, often when people write a book, I mean, it takes a long time to write a book. So when you write a book, you want to say thank you. And often you want to say thank you to one particular person or a few people who really, really helped you. So in this case, I felt like this was this case. So what I'm thinking is that often on the inside cover we have all of the information that you need for your citation. This is actually the information we want. This here is called a dedication. So it means this book is dedicated to, is to say thank you to this person. So in this case, for Dr. Cruz, it would be dedicated to Paul. Okay? In the case of your book, it was dedicated to the author's sister, his lovely or her lovely sister, Phoebe. So that's a dedication. It is not a citation. Number 4, it stumped me. Do you know what stumped means? Stumped means it confused me. I didn't understand what it was. It just stopped me. So after all this time, question mark. I'm not sure if that's a dedication. It doesn't look like a dedication to me because it doesn't mention any person at all. But at any rate, the most important point that I'm trying to establish here is this is not a citation. Remember that your citation, you need some basic framework. You need to know the author's name. You need to know the book title. You need to know where it was published, when it was published, and who it was published by. So I'm hoping that this was clear. Please remember your citations because we will be using them later as well. If you, again, are confused, review. Go back over your weekly assignments and see if you did what was required of you. If you're still not sure, you can take a look at the videos again. If you don't want to, ask somebody. It's no problem. But again, one of the skills you should be developing in university is your ability to question. So if you feel shy, ask a classmate, ask your class captain. If you feel brave, ask me, or follow those steps. It doesn't really matter, but the most important point is ask the questions if you have them. Okay, moving on. So moving on now to slide 6. So slide 6 was, again, we're still working on week 8. So week 8 is, this, however, is our spectrum. Okay, so we're talking about the Spectrum Language Arts Grade 4. And there were some simple issues here which I noticed. So I wanted to talk about them just briefly. So the first thing I noticed, and something to be very careful of, and something also that maybe you'll see with your elementary school students, is overcorrection. So overcorrection can sometimes also be referred to as hypercorrection. And what this means is that a student learns one particular point to focus on. It can be grammar, it can be pronunciation, it could be writing. But what happens is they apply that one point to too many things. So in this case, for our assignments, some students, instead of focusing on July having a capital letter, and 7th does not need a capital letter because it's just a number order. What they did is they capitalized too much. So they capitalized everything. So capital J, July, capital S, 7th. There's no need to capitalize the S in 7th. So do be careful about that, about applying that to too much of, rather than just the one simple point, the names are proper nouns, applying it to everything. So do be careful. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was that I know many of you are very busy. I totally understand, me too. But if you're going to do something, do it well. Okay, so this is a basic principle that I think is true. And I guess for many of you also, you probably don't like English, and so you just want to just get it done. So what I noticed from your Spectrum skills homework assignment is that many of you just copied and pasted from the book. So they gave you an example, and you just took the example and filled in the blanks with your example. But actually, what you should be doing is providing your own examples. The reason why I encourage this more than anything is because it gives you a deeper understanding and a deeper connection to what it is we are learning. So, on that note, do not copy my examples, do not copy book examples, because actually they don't help you. What you should be doing is taking something from your own memory, from your own life, and applying it in the same way. So, for example, I've got here book titles. Now, I also noticed that many of you didn't notice that book titles and movie titles should be underlined. That's a big part of what this exercise was trying to show you. Any book title you wrote should have been underlined. Also, we should have capital letters, of course, and we should be giving our own books, not our book examples. So I chuckled because of Winn-Dixie is a very American book. So I was curious that many of you wrote, the last book I read was because of Winn-Dixie. So if you did read it, good for you. I'm quite impressed. That's not a book I have read. But whatever the case, you should be applying honestly and truthfully what the last book that you read was. An issue that I thought might also be relevant is perhaps you read a Korean book, which is fine, perfectly fine. Just because it's in Korean does not mean it doesn't apply to this type of exercise. It just means you have two choices, basically. Number one, do you want to write the title in Hangul, in Korean, but just use English letters? Or number two is you can choose to translate the title into the English equivalent, okay, the English meaning. There are two ways of doing it, in my opinion. It's absolutely up to you what you want to do. Now, some movies, for example, especially movies lately, because many Korean movies have become critically acclaimed, have English titles already. So if you take a look at the books, and many of the books that have been translated originally were written in English or in a different language. So perhaps there already is an English language title for them. So have a look, see if you can find it. Anyways, moving on. For movie titles also should be underlined. I would have preferred that you provide your own movie because I think a book or a movie that you liked is better than writing The Polar Express. So did you really like The Polar Express, number one? And number two, was it a recent movie that you've seen? I was surprised how many people answered it. So again, I was like, okay, they've just taken it from the examples, I think. But anyways, the most important points about the titles, of course, are number one, it's underlined. Number two is that we have capital letters. So don't forget, even if Dreamgirls was your favorite movie, was the movie that you really liked, you gave thumbs up to, I liked it, we still need capital D, capital G, and no period, because it's a title, we don't need a period, it's not a sentence. Finally, our songs. So there were 2 points here that I thought were quite cute. Number one, do you know these songs? Here Comes the Sun, Getting to Know You, At the Bottom of the Sea. I'm not sure if any of you are Beatles fans, but you could put, again, any song you wanted. But many of you chose the same songs as in the example, which is okay, it's up to you, I guess. But one of the major focuses is that we start with the quotes. So your quotation marks, you should open quote, write the title of the song, and then close quote. Okay, but many of you didn't. So also, of course, we should be using capital letters because it's a song title. And again, if you want to use Korean songs, lovely. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, this is Korea. This is, our culture. But you have to decide how. So again, you have those 2 choices. Would you like to use the song and give it in Hangul, but with English letters? Or would you like to translate the song? Maybe actually the song also has an English title as well. It's possible. So anyways, it is up to you. But please, please, please try to use your own examples. Don't copy, because copying doesn't help you. And also for your future students, I think that's something that you should be teaching your future students, is for them to help themselves and to learn things by their own expression, their own production, their own connection to what it is they're learning, rather than simply memorization. Because memorization, although it is effective, it doesn't provide a deep connection to what it is you're learning. Anyways, moving on. I'm moving on now to slide 7. So we're working on our week 9 review. And if you remember, for week 9 we talked about 2 major points. The first one was about presenting in English. So presenting in English, again, it follows the same pattern as when we write a paragraph. Again, the starting point for writing or presenting is to decide what your topic is. So to do this, we need to consider about, our W's and our H's. 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, why, and decide which of these are important to your topic. We can also ask further questions like how, and how long, and how often, and how much. And if these are important to the topic, we answer the questions and we give the answers in our introduction to a paragraph, to an essay, or when we're presenting, to what we will be presenting on. So the key point about this is that you're giving a full introduction to the general topic that you will be discussing. So once you've chosen your topic, our next step, of course, is to move on to our details. So once we've chosen a topic and we move on to our details, then we want to develop those details a little bit more. So the development of the details gives us a fuller picture. It gives us a better idea of what this person is interested in and what they want us to learn from their presentation. The important point about this is to provide balance. So once again, whether you're presenting or whether you're writing, we need to keep some sort of system so that our audience can see where we are, what we're talking about, and that we give equal focus to each of our details. So the most important thing is when you're presenting, when you're speaking, we keep the same number of sentences and the same when we're writing. So our conclusion, I've moved on now to slide number 9. So slide number 9 is our conclusion. This is usually, especially students who are really busy, like to forget, they like to skip it, but please don't. Your conclusion is really important, especially as a presentation, because in your presentation it shows you are finishing. You are closing the presentation, you're coming to the end. So our conclusions basically are a way for us to show we're finishing off. We go back to the beginning, so we give our topic one more time, we restate the topic, but the key to this is how skillfully you can do it. So we're going to give the same information again, but remember that to show you have a high skill level and a high education level, we do this using new vocabulary and or by changing the sentence structure. So we're giving the exact same information, but we're doing it in different ways, and that is a very, very skillful ability. Again, of course, because we are still thinking about the balance, you should be making sure that your introduction, your 3 details, and your conclusion all have the same amount of time given to them. So if you're speaking, it should be the same amount of time, and if you're writing, it should be the same amount of time. Okay. Moving on now to our last slide for part 1. Yay! So our last slide for part 1 is slide 10. And our second major point really for week 9 was how to develop a paragraph into an essay. So the first point I want to check is to see how many sentences we should have in our paragraphs. So, how many sentences should we have in our paragraphs? If you are not sure what to answer, then you should definitely be reviewing. You should have 10 sentences in your paragraphs. For university level, this is pretty much a minimum. The next thing is to decide how to move from a paragraph to an essay. So if our paragraphs have 10 sentences, an essay actually is 5 paragraphs, okay? So our introduction paragraph has 5 sentences, and then we've got 3 detailed paragraphs. Detail 1 paragraph, which is when we take detail 1 from our introduction and we develop it. We have our detailed 2 paragraph, so 10 sentences again, and we take our detailed 2 general introduction and we develop it. And then we've got our detailed 3 paragraph, 10 sentences, which we take again from paragraph number 1, our detail 3, and we develop it. And then our final, remember your conclusion and your introduction paragraphs are very similar, but now you can see perhaps why changing the vocabulary and changing the sentence structure, but still giving the same information, the summary of the information you've covered, is very important and very skillful, so it doesn't become boring. So essentially, how many sentences are in an essay? 50 sentences in an essay. So don't be scared, don't freak out, it's not a big deal if you approach it systematically as we have learned. So I'm going to be talking a little bit further about this in part 2, but we're going to stop here. So take a break, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.